My book, Overground Railroad, will be a children's book coming out in 2021, and it'll be for ages 9 to 12. So we're working on that. And as I said, I'm doing this project with National Geographic, the digital interactive map. And then I'm designing a board game. So that's underway. I mean, it's so crazy because even though the book is done, there's still so much about this history that I'm still mining. And so I imagine there will just be more products and other, material that's coming out of this research because the book can only hold so much. I have thousands of files, research over these years of doing the work. So I think there's still more stories to tell with this project. I did, writing this book was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I did tell my agent after I finished it, I was like, I'm not writing any more books. I was like, there's got to be a better way to make a living. Like we can do other things. And she's like, well, I mean, I've said this before. I wasn't going to write any more books. But it is the hardest thing I do. And this book in particular, because when I first wrote my proposal, it was not this book for this project. It was more, there were like themed chapters on different types of green book sites, and I sold it to Abrams. We were really happy with it, but once I had a fellowship at Harvard, I had a fellowship at the Schomburg in New York, and then I went to Harvard, and then I went on the road for at least, it was about 6 months that I lived out of hotels. And had I just stayed at Harvard, this would have been a very different book. But once I went on the road and I saw these communities and, 53 people being shot in one weekend in Chicago, and looking at Skid Row and Los Angeles, I was like, I cannot write something that's just a historic travel guide. Like there's so much more to tell here. So when I got off the road, I wrote to Abrams and I said, let me just rewrite the proposal based on, because now it's a different project. And if you don't like it, we can go back to the original one. That's fine. But once I started the book out with Ron, because my stepfather died literally the week I started writing the book. And when I was grieving his death was when I was writing all his stories that he told me on the road. And I just told my agent, I was like, I know I'm supposed to be writing the book, but all I can write are Ron's stories. And I would just sit there and cry every morning with the sun coming up, and I'd just be writing Ron's stories so I wouldn't forget them. And by the end of that 2 weeks, I said, I think I'm going to open the book with Ron in the backseat of the car. And then I realized his stories were a touchstone in almost every chapter. So having Ron's stories is kind of a narrative thread. Having my journey, doing this field research is a narrative thread. Having obviously the green books, I'm looking at them chronologically. Looking at history and that pendulum of justice when things move forward. So there were like these 4 layers I was constantly having to navigate in writing the book. So it became a much harder book to write. And I had to do it in 8 months. And when I was done, I mean, of course I had editors and everybody looking over this, but when I was done, I was like, I don't even know if this thing makes sense. Like I was so
inside it.
Yeah. And then I just had no real distance from it to even, I just knew it was done. And I was like, thank God I'm still standing and it's done. And that's all I could do. But now that it has been out, for a month and people really like it and it's people get it, that's a real huge blessing, because honestly, I was like, I guess I know I did my best, but I really don't know if it's good. Even though my editors were like, we love it, it's great. And I was like, yeah, I'm really hard on myself. But so that's all to say, I can't say whether or not I'm going to write another book, but I think I have so much work right now with all these different products in place and the exhibition, and I'm really going to try to just ride this now and see where it leads.